I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at Gold Derby, here with Carla Gugino, who stars in the fall of the House of Usher. First of all, Carla, congratulations on your recent Critics' Choice nomination for your role in Usher. How exciting.
Thank you. So exciting.
You know, I looked, and after decades in showbiz, that was your first major nomination. It's nice to get a pat on the back, isn't it?
It really is. It was such a beautiful surprise. I feel so fortunate for the career that I have had, and I've been doing this most of my life, over 30 years. And I've received a lot of wonderful notices, etc. But I have just that hasn't been a part of my experience. And and so it was a really, really beautiful moment. And it's so interesting. It's so cool that for lack of a more articulate word, but it is really the fact that this genre is, so often overlooked, the horror genre. And we can pick out the occasional Natalie Portman and, or Jack Nicholson in The Shining, or Kathy Bates in Misery. I mean, there's a few sort of performances over time that have really made it sort of gotten critical acclaim in that genre. But I also think that something that's so cool, here I am playing this sort of ethereal, non-human being in Usher, and my biggest task was to sort of saddle her with humanity. Was actually to really not have it be sort of this, omnipotent, knows everything kind of removed force, but actually really juxtaposed between this kind of raven perched on a branch watching humanity and all of their foibles, and also some, because I was able to play these 7 different incarnations of this character, each one of those incarnations really needed to be fully human. So it's been so cool that would be the thing that would get this kind of attention. And it just proves you just never know. I mean, life is full of surprises, and that's so cool.
It is very cool, and it's the perfect description, I think, for it. Because you don't do the work for awards, but it's just nice that you get the recognition, that particularly from the critics. They've always been behind the Flaniverse, I like to call it,
Yes. Yes.
and it's nice that you get chosen as one of the ones that they love the most. Let's talk about the mysterious Verna, your character. She's this nefarious shapeshifter who preys on the Usher family, and she's ubiquitous. Like, she's like a harbinger of death, a puppet
Yeah.
master. I love that. That's such a delicious character to sink your teeth into. When you first landed the role, what were you more excited or more nervous about how you were going to make, as you say earlier, how you're going to
Yeah.
make this person someone that we would understand and maybe even slightly relate to?
Right. Yeah, no, it was Mike was I was fortunate enough for him. He was starting to send me the scripts as they were being written in real time. So it felt a little bit like a show that you really want to binge, but you can't. You have to wait another week, so I kept waiting for the new drafts. And what's always clear with him, I mean, he's an extraordinary writer, and because he directs and edits as well, he has a very strong vision. And so I know that when I'm going to do something with him, that it will be really good. But in terms of sort of what hits the zeitgeist or not, you never know. But in this particular case, he had mentioned to me probably a year before that he was going to do something based on Edgar Allan Poe, and that he wanted me to play the Raven, and would I be interested? And of course, immediately I was, and that's all the information I had. So as this was unfolding, as I was reading it, I was taken in by, because Verna starts with there's a sense of mystery. Obviously, we don't really understand until the end the full context of her character, even though she is pulling the strings, as you said, and she is the sort of golden thread of the story. She is sort of pushing forward the story in that way. And but I read, each character started to unfold, I thought, wow, this is magnificent and surprising, and as he always is, thematically very rich. in his writing. And, you know, again, horror really does allow you to explore as an actor these deeper themes and anxieties and preoccupations. You know, once you've delivered on the sort of uncanny and the scary elements of things, you then can go, you can be as smart as you want to be. So as I'm seeing this, I'm going, oh, wow, he's talking about accountability. He's talking about hubris. He's talking about fate. He's talking about karma, you know, all of these things that are so interesting. And then about 7 episodes in, it dawned on me, oh, right, I'm playing this. I have to pull it off.
Yeah.
Oh no, this is so good. What if I fail and I don't do justice to what he's written? So I would say that initially was great excitement, then came terror, and then came actually that sort of, I think what people, you know, people talk about the 10,000 hours. Like if you've been doing something for, you know, that book Blink, I think actually addresses it in terms of a fireman who runs into a building and he's in the midst of this sort of disaster that's happening. And he looks at everybody and says, run now, get out. And the building collapses. And they say to him, what, how did you know to do that? And he said, I knew. I've been doing this for long enough that something didn't feel right. And I think that in a way, eventually skill kicks in the sense that I have been doing this since I was a young teenager. And you know, acting is the love of my life. And so in that way, the terror then there is a familiar feeling in which it turns into, okay, now let me focus on what I actually need to do to calibrate this character. And in this case, that was extremely challenging because
Yeah.
there were so many.
So many. It's actually really refreshing to hear from someone like yourself to say, look, you know, honestly, this was a really big challenge and I had to really dig deep. And even though you've been doing this for many years, every single project's going to have its own intricacies and challenges that you have to take on. And with Mike, his work, I love it how you don't really understand the full motivation until very much close to the end of the particular series. And in that's a lot. I think that's a lot of weight and pressure to put on the actors, particularly you in this character, because she is quite she's a villain, but I don't know if she really is. By the end, I was questioning her characterization as a villain because it's more nuanced on
Yeah.
that than that. Like just like the ambiguity with your character, Olivia Crane. She was really being controlled by that house. So she wasn't really the villain, but of course she was a bit of an antagonist. So talk me
Yeah.
through that challenge in terms of um, giving us the nuance that yes, she's doing evil things, but there was a reason for that, and maybe that gives us an in into her psychology.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really astute observation. And I think that's one of the most interesting things about the characters that I've gotten to play. I mean, always contradiction is interesting in character, you know, and because people are, and I think that's what makes us relate, you know, so often you could say, oh, that person would never do that. And they do, you know, because we are complex. And so for sure, well, interestingly with Olivia, um, I needed to find a way into, you know, obviously, ultimately, she's killing her children. So it's a pretty intense
Right.
situation. But certainly that's not where that came from. That instinct comes in her from being the ultimate mother cub and wanting to protect her children from the world, the terrors of the world. The irony, of course, is that she is actually, you know, perpetuating those terrors inside. But it was a real key to me when I started thinking about it like a love story with the house. And that, as strange as that sounds, that there was this very formidable voice for her that said, this is the safe place. If you keep them here, they will never be hurt by the world. And that because of her own mental state and the haunting, she believes it fully. So I never for a second played that role anything other than with the hugest love for my children. And so again, I think the discordant nature between what her intention is and what her action is was something really fascinating to play. And then Verna was interesting because Verna, before it came out, but when the press was sort of coming out about it, everyone kept saying Carla Gugino is playing a demon, da, 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 you know. And I was really excited for people to see it unfold because ultimately, I don't think she's a villain, and I love a good villain, by the way. She does villainous things, but the thing that was interesting to me is that she really is the hand of fate. She really has a job to do, which is she never once lies to the ushers about what the consequences of their actions will be. I mean, when we get back and we see the initial deal being done, by the time we're at the end of the show, and you see the full scene play out, I mean, she lays it out for them exactly. And she says, you can have all these things, but these will be the consequences. And this is what will happen to the future generations. And this is, and they don't really listen, frankly, because ultimately when what happens with Lenore happens, they were devastated, um, but in that case, I actually found it to be such an interesting. All That Jazz is my favorite movie of all time, and
Wow.
Jessica Lange, the Angel of Death, is so extraordinary. And I think one of the things that I found extraordinary beyond performance was the notion of this kind of, if you could have the most honest conversation you've ever had before you die, and really look at yourself 100%, look in all the dark corners that you don't want to look in, would there be some sense of exaltation, some sense of freedom before you go? And so that became something really interesting to me to explore with Verna. And I talked about that with Mike, and he sort of incorporated it even more in the script, so that while these terrible fates are going to meet these people, she's offering them a chance to change. She's offering them a chance to make a different decision, which they mostly don't. But she's also sort of saying, like, hi, I'm here without human moral judgment to actually give you space to be exactly who you are. And that was an interesting way in for me.
Wow, that's so deep. And just you talking about it just reminded me. I mean, I loved this series, and I uh I just think it's such an underrated gem. There's so much to unpack that Mike was able to throw together. Obviously, basically loosely based on the Poe works of
Yeah.
yesteryear, but bringing it into this generation, I just think is so fascinating. Let's talk a bit more about Mike Flanagan, because
Yeah.
this marks your fifth collaboration with him, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, he appears to bring out the best in you. So talk me through what you most value about working with him.
One of the things that became really evident immediately upon our first conversation about Gerald's Game was they had offered me this project. I didn't know the context at that point that somebody had dropped out and that they were literally starting to shoot in 2 weeks. So basically, from the moment that I read the script to the moment we were actually filming was 2 weeks. So I thought, first of all, how do I prepare for this when I'm in every single frame of the film? It's a movie that I'm literally, there's nowhere to hide, literally, or metaphorically. It was just completely. And so therefore I thought, well, this could either be an amazing role or the end of my career. and so I got on the phone with Mike, and immediately I thought, this is a filmmaker that I'm really interested in collaborating with. He was so precise. He was so clear about what he wanted to accomplish. He'd been wanting to make this, unmakeable book for a very long time. So he was really just so clear. But because of that, and it's what I found with most great directors, is there is real room for collaboration, because first of all, they realize that whatever thing you have to offer, they will get credit for it anyway. You know what I mean? It's just sort of,
Yeah.
it's like, but it's the insecure ones that feel this really crazy need to like hold on to this concept. Even though film has 3 processes, you have to move from the script to the filming, and then from filming to editing. And we as actors know that part in the editing too. You give all your, your work, and then they will do with it what they will after. So it really is a process of collaboration and of releasing in order to find the next best thing. So what was so cool was he was extremely open to ideas. And also we were just very in sync right away. I think that the key thing that I want to say is that while he chooses predominantly horror as his genre, and he obviously connects very deeply to it, he is constantly, as we spoke about a little bit earlier, if you have an inspired filmmaker in that genre, you have an opportunity to explore really deep, really complex, and issues and moral conundrums and character. I mean, it's always been a sort of a beautiful, fertile ground for an actor, because there's usually a great depth of emotion. There's something that's pushing you to your limits as a human being, and there's something that's testing your mettle. So for all those reasons, that's really, and it's psychological by nature. So I think for me, and maybe I don't know why he gravitated towards me, that would be for him to answer, but the reason that I gravitated towards him was not because I've been a horror fan per se, though The Shining is also in my top three, but that I love him as a storyteller, and that I'm constantly wanting to. He never asks you to go less deep. He always welcomes, hey, what if we could excavate this part of her? What if we, one of the things in The Haunting of Hill House is that she has these migraines, and that was something that I knew there needed to be something that she had that would make the kids not question her behavior for a while, because they don't question it for a while. She's behaving very strangely from the start by the nature of the way the story is structured. And so I was reading all of a sudden Oliver Sacks came to mind, and he has this book called Hallucinations, and it was something that I thought, oh my gosh, let me read about. I had read about these migraines before, and they're not the oral migraines. There's sort of a different kind, which like Lewis Carroll had, a lot of people had, and they're extremely unpleasant, but they also kind of can open the door to creativity. And you see things sometimes in like a grid-like shape. And because she was an architect, they had written that in. I thought that was an interesting element. And if the kids were used to her having migraines, they would forgive a lot of behavior initially. And so it was something that I presented to Mike as an idea, and he ran with it. And of course, I'm not a writer. He's an amazing writer. So he actually wrote it in such an just intrinsic, much more interesting way than I would have even thought. So it's that kind of experience with him that's so gratifying. And I think it's innate trust too, right? Because it just a lot of shorthand. You just get a lot of, you have a shorthand, and you get a lot of the extra out of the way, which is so wonderful.
Oh, I can only imagine. And he tends to work with a growing set of actors in his
Yeah.
own troupe, so to speak. And on this series, we had Bruce and Annabeth and Zach and Rahul and
Yeah.
Tania and Kate, Henry, yourself,
Yeah.
just to name a few. Given that the show is so dark, but there's a lot of actors who know each other, and they love working with Mike. Is the vibe on set um fun, different, or like a family? Can you explain that to us?
Yeah, for sure, like a family. For sure, it's so exciting when you get to go back to work and know that you're going to see everybody. It's a great feeling. It's like a reunion. And also that I think there's a unspoken agreement that we're all there to serve a story, and a story that we all believe in. And we adore Mike as a human being and as a filmmaker, but also that there is a fearlessness in that ensemble. And I think even when people like Mary McDonnell or Willa Fitzgerald, people who hadn't worked with Mike before this time, they came in, there's a spirit that you come into it with. And I think he must have a sort of a radar for that. So there's this great sense of abandon and trust that comes from it. And so, yes, so there have been lighter and more intense moments, certainly because of the subject matter, but there's always that wonderful, there's usually some sort of a karaoke night, or there's a nice big dinner, or there's interestingly, I was the least social probably that I've ever been, because for me, everything's about a great long dinner that you get to sit and chat. And, I always love to sort of set those up on sets. But in this case, because Verna was so work intensive, I really spent a lot of time. I was staying in an apartment that was very, very high up. We filmed in Vancouver, and I used to see birds just traveling in and out of my window. It was all glass. And I really did feel like Verna up there on that perch as the Raven. And so I just spent a lot of time doing homework, really. I mean, just really, because not only was there a lot of physical work to do, but also these different accents and different places in which, sort of centers in which each one of these characters existed in physically. And some days I had to do like two characters in one day, so I had to be able to flip very quickly, as well as reciting Edgar Allan Poe. There was just a lot of, so this was the one that I had a couple of meals. Annabeth and I got a meal, and I got a meal with Mike and Kate. Like there was snuck, Willa Fitzgerald and I took walks, Mary and I,
Yeah.
like Bruce and I got our favorite pasta, we did a couple of those things, but it was a little bit more of a solitary experience for me on that one.
That's understandable, actually. But it just sounds like when you're in an environment where people are really, they're familiar with each other, they love the work, and the creator is really open to collaboration. Wow, you can really fly. Like you can really
Yeah.
make something really interesting happen and compelling. And that's exactly what happened. And I love the way it ends with um Verna leaving a token for each usher and then reciting the poem. You've got this beautiful veil over your face, and then she flies away. I said, yes, that's just perfection. It's such a great ending.
Yeah.
We have run out
He's,
of time, but
Mike is I was just gonna say, Mike is a very poetic filmmaker. And
yeah.
so I think there's something about this piece. Certainly Bly Manor has a poetry in its language
Oh
too.
yeah.
But that's such again, I think sometimes horror can be done cheaply. And I don't mean that by money. I mean that by
No.
like jump scares or,
Yeah.
certain kind of things that are innately manipulative.
Unearned. Yeah.
Yeah, and that is what the genre can be in some form, but he's added the poetry that I think is such a and poetry is what introduces us to the transcendent, like something larger, like we are a part of something larger, and he as a filmmaker is able to embody that in his work,
He
which is
really
rare.
is. And which is why now when I see a Flanaverse show and you're not in it, I'm like, what's happening? You went in Midnight Mass, and I was like, I feel lost. Why aren't you
I
in this?
know. Thanks, thanks. I really appreciate it. We tried.
We try. Well,
That
yeah,
was a scheduling thing, so
of course, you can't do
but yes.
everything. Um,
Um,
yeah, but I
so
just
lovely.
wanted to quickly mention before we go, just for like 30 seconds, that you were also in the Girls on the Bus this season, and
Yeah.
I'm such a huge political junkie. I devour political punditry all day. It's kind
Oh,
of like shows
wow.
that I need to get out more.
Yeah.
Did being on Girls on the Bus scratch any itch for your own interest in politics?
Oh, it's interesting, because I am not by nature political. I just wasn't raised in a political family. I think that's where it starts a lot. I don't know if that was the case for you, but where your parents are, really engaged. And
Yeah.
but there's no doubt that, I mean, it just be sort of even researching life on the road, as a political journalist. And I mean, at this point in life, we have to be somewhat politically aware, obviously, because it's just affecting us so deeply right now on a massive level, just societally, and on a very, I've always said I'm a humanitarian more than politically oriented, but now they are really part and parcel. But Amy Chozick, who, it's based on her book, she was so knowledgeable, and just getting into the character of Grace, who is so obsessed with it and getting the story out on time. I definitely have been, I must admit, I'm listening and watching a little bit more now than I was.
Well, there you go. I think that's you can join the club because I can't stop.
Yeah,
It's an
exactly.
addiction. Carla, thank you so much for your insight today and your time, and congratulations on like some of your best work yet in Usher. It's really amazing.
That means so much to me, really. Thank you.